Welcome, Big Ten fans. This is Big Ten Ted Live. Schedules, and more schedules. We are live on a Wednesday night. Here it is, another edition of Big Ten Ted Live. And yes, we're going to be talking about schedules. It was on this show 1 week ago, last week. It was the day before the release of the Big Ten schedules. And now that we've seen the schedules, let's kind of really dive into them a little bit more. Of course, earlier this evening, you had the SEC coming out with their schedules, their 8-game conference schedules. We're going to talk about that in another segment. If this is your first time coming aboard Big Ten Ted and Big Ten Ted Live, I invite you to subscribe so you catch the next Wednesday live stream and the Wednesday live stream after that and the Wednesday live stream after that, as well as videos, shorts, polls, all kinds of content. Content comes in many different forms every single day on this channel. So make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss a stream, you don't miss an upload, you don't miss anything here on the channel. You can interact here tonight. The Big Ten fan, or if you're not a Big Ten fan, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, you can chime in here tonight on Big Ten Ted Live via chat. The live chat is open. Super Chats help support the channel as well. So you can be involved with chats here tonight and leave your thoughts on a variety of topics, of course, Big Ten related. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about tonight on the live show. Tonight on Big Ten Ted Live. So now that we have the schedules for 2024 and 2025 in the Big Ten Conference, I want to look ahead a little bit. I want to try to predict the future. I want to go into the crystal ball, so to speak, and try to take a look at what might happen, who might be some risers, and who might fall a little bit in each year in 2024 and 2025 based on the schedule. I know it is very difficult, especially in today's day and age of college football, to really look forward a little bit. Transfer portal, teams change over so much from year to year, but I'm going to try my best to look forward. And just because I say someone might rise or someone might fall in 2024 and 2025, it's just trying to look ahead a little bit, more looking at their schedule really more than anything. So we'll see. We'll see how correct I am a few years down the road. So we're going to look at that as well. And then I want to thank John Brink for this topic number 2, segment 2. We're going to talk about, will the Big Ten schedule mean more than the SEC schedule? Of course, you got the 9-game Big Ten conference schedule. You got the 8-game SEC schedule. Which schedule will mean more? And when we talk about meaning more, it really means more in terms of the college football playoff, 12-team at-large bids, that kind of thing. We start that, of course, in 2024. So we're going to talk about that as well. Couple other short segments we want to get into here today. This topic idea from Sunshine Design. Thank you for submitting this. Can Northwestern move the needle in Chicagoland with their new stadium, the renovation, whatever you want to call it, of Ryan Field? We're going to touch on that, and then we're also going to talk about Imarian Stewart. Depending on what recruiting service you really subscribe to, high 3-star, low 4-star. It looks like he's headed to Michigan, but he's set to commit on Friday. 2 Big Ten schools are in the running right now for Imarian Stewart. Wisconsin and Michigan are in the running as well, along with Oregon and Tennessee. Michigan is really building up a great recruiting class. We're going to talk about that here as this show progresses on Big Ten Ted Live tonight, and I want to do a little promotion as well for the channel. Starting September 3rd, I'm going to have an additional live show on Sunday nights, 9 Eastern, 8 Central. Once you're able to watch all the games from the weekend, all the games from Saturday, digest it a little bit, we'll come back and talk about all the games Sundays during the football season, 9 Eastern, 8 o'clock Central. It's the Big Ten Sunday Sound Off right here on the Big Ten Ted YouTube channel. Thanks for coming aboard, everybody, here tonight for a Wednesday edition of Big Ten Ted Live. It is June. We're getting through the dog days of the offseason. We're right smack dab. Spring transfer portal period is behind us. There's a lot of spring football, spring practice. All that's in the rearview mirror. And we got previews and everything coming up. Preview magazines are starting to come out as well here in July. So we're kind of smack dab in the middle of the season. It's a big recruiting time, right? I mentioned that last segment we're going to get to. Big recruiting time. This is kind of when you're starting to lay the groundwork recruiting-wise, what your team's going to look like in the upcoming years. But I want to talk about schedules. I want to talk about schedules here tonight, because that's what a lot of people have their mind on. Last week, the Big Ten schedules were unveiled, right? 2024 and 2025. The Big Ten scheduling model is the chef's kiss of a 16-team conference scheduling model. It's great, but with it being great comes a little bit more challenges for maybe teams that aren't used to them, and just shuffling in some unexpected things that are a little bit different in terms of scheduling. I want to take a look at some teams that might rise, some teams that might fall in the respective years in 2024 and in 2025. Now, before I really dive into this, I want to break this thing down a little bit, because there are some teams with this new schedule throughout the Big Ten where expectations might have to adjust, I think, a little bit. Like, you start first with the teams in the Big Ten East. You start with the Power 3, Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State in the Power 3. Now, instead of it coming down to Ohio State and Michigan every year, Penn State's got a shot, and maybe it won't come down to that last game every single season. Now, it's not just one team, it's two teams potentially coming out of that group in the Power 3 as well. And then you kind of journey over to the Big Ten West, right? You've had teams, like in Iowa. You've had teams like a Wisconsin that have been, their goals have been to get to Indianapolis by winning the Big Ten championship. Now with USC and Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and those blue blood type of programs at the top of our Big Ten conference, now do the expectations adjust a little bit within those types of the Iowas, the Wisconsins? You can maybe throw Minnesota in there as well. Those teams that are used to hanging around atop the Big Ten West, maybe being in contention to go to a Big Ten championship game. Do those expectations need to adjust as we set forth on this journey into a new schedule? Those are things I want to start out with the additions of USC and UCLA to create a 16-team conference. Okay, let's get in right to it. 2024. Let's start first with a riser, and this is a big-time riser. Now, you might think they're already pretty damn good. Penn State is my first riser of 2024, but the last few years, Penn State has been in a position where they're below Michigan, below Ohio State. They just can't get over the hump against the Wolverines or the Buckeyes. But when I look forward to the 2024 edition of the Penn State Nittany Lions, here are players that will be true juniors. Drew Allar is going to be a true junior. We know how much hype is behind Drew this season. He's going to have a year as a starter under his belt. We know how talented he can be. How about Katron Allen and Nick Singleton? Yeah, they got at least 2 more years of college football still to play, coming off those tremendous freshman seasons for both Katron and Mr. Singleton. Those guys, they're all going to be true juniors on that team. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball, and Abdul Carter, one of the best linebackers, best young linebackers in the nation, best linebackers in the Big Ten this season. Imagine what he's going to be in 2024. They're going to build around those guys. 2023 was an excellent recruiting class for Penn State on the offensive line. Going back to the year before, of course, we know Nick Singleton, right? Of course, we know Drew Allar. Like, they recruited the skill positions very well, and then they went to the offensive line the next year in 2023. Okay, we know all of this, but I've been saying it for a while now. 2024 is the year of the Nittany Lion. I firmly believe that Penn State is going to be in a prime position in 2024 to not only compete for a Big Ten title, but to possibly compete for a national title as well. Let's dive into maybe their schedule a little bit. Penn State in 2024, they got to go to Indiana, to Purdue, to Rutgers. Not exactly a murderer's row of away games. Their toughest game on the road at Wisconsin, going and jumping around at Camp Randall. When you look at their home games, Michigan State and Northwestern, very winnable games. You look at Nebraska, should be a winnable game, especially when you consider the talent level of Penn State coming into Happy Valley, never easy. Now, they got to play Ohio State and USC at home. Now, even if they're able to split those two games, that could still be an 11-1 record, an 11-1 type of season for Penn State. The schedule is very favorable for the Nittany Lions. Like, you consider their talent, and even if they had one of the toughest schedules in the Big Ten, I'd still consider them a Big Ten championship contender. But then you take a look at the toughest games they have are in Happy Valley, and then their toughest game on the road is at Wisconsin. This is very favorable for the Penn State Nittany Lions in 2024. Let's move on to another potential riser. When I talk about Penn State, they're rising because they're rising to a Big Ten championship, a potential national championship level with the talent that they have, right, from where they are right now. 10-2, you look at last season, you look at 2019, I think going all the way back to 2017, they've kind of been on the outside looking in as it pertains to battling with Ohio State and with Michigan. Another potential riser in 2024 you have to take a look at is Nebraska. It will be the second year of Matt Rule's reign as head coach of the Cornhuskers. Let me start first with this. Jeff Sims ain't going to be one and done, folks. Okay, I don't know if he's that talented of a quarterback. I think he's going to do good in year number one, but I just don't think he's going to be an NFL quarterback after 1 year in this Nebraska system. I believe he's going to be back in 2024, maybe floating around one of the top 5, top 6, maybe definitely the top half as quarterbacks in the conference. He might even be there at times this season in 2023 as well. So he's not going to be one and done, returning your quarterback. And then you look at guys like Thomas Fedoni, Gabe Irvin Jr., Xavier Betts. How about Malachi Coleman after his freshman season? Could have a big-time breakout season his sophomore season. Isaiah Garcia Castaneda. They could all come back as playmakers for this offense. And a lot of these things of who might rise and who might fall has to determine who comes back to this team. But second year in a Matt Rule system, although the third year is generally the year when Nebraska, or I shouldn't say Nebraska, a Matt Rule team really takes a step forward. I believe maybe year number 2 could be the year where Matt Rule, and I'm not saying this is going to be a Big Ten championship type of team. I think they're going to rise to maybe an 8-win type of level within the Big Ten Conference. And when you take a look at Nebraska's games those years, at Iowa, at Northwestern, at Penn State, at Purdue, and at UCLA, home games. They got to play Indiana, Michigan State, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. They are at home. Penn State, they got to go on the road. But when you talk about the Big Four, that's the only member of the Big Four that they have to play that season in 2024. This shapes up very nicely for Nebraska in 2024 to possibly put some wins together and get back to that level where maybe they're winning 8 games, where maybe this is a team that's winning 9 games, and the Colorado home and home series is in Lincoln, Nebraska as well. If they split the toss-up games, which is going on the road to UCLA, at Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, you split those games, you could possibly see a team that's 6-3 in conference. Maybe they go 9-3. Maybe they lose to Colorado and they go 8-4, but they could definitely rise up to where they've been. I think in 2023 they're sitting around a 6-6 type of level. Those are risers in 2024. When I look at teams that could potentially fall, I think in 2024, I want to start with the Iowa Hawkeyes. 2023, a lot of experienced talent, like especially on defense. There could be a handful of guys, 7, 8, 9 guys on this defense in 2023 that might not be here in 2024. Now, we know what Iowa does. They reload on the defensive side of the football, but these last 2 years, 2022 and 2023, that's a good chunk of talent for the Iowa Hawkeyes that might be moving on, going to the NFL, kind of things like that with the Hawkeyes. Can they reload on defense, I think, is a big. And now with no Cade McNamara, where do they go at quarterback? Where do the Hawkeyes go at the quarterback position, I think, is a big question. Is the recruit Marco Linus, is he the answer? Is he the answer in this 2024 class as the future at quarterback for the Iowa Hawkeyes? That's going to be a huge question, I believe, for Iowa going forward. When you take a look at Iowa's schedule, they got to go on the road to Illinois, Minnesota, and look at this, at Ohio State, at USC, got to play on the road at Rutgers as well. Their home games, got to play UCLA, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Maryland. Like, the thing that really sticks out to me is those games in Columbus at the Coliseum. Like, there's a potential that you could say, well, let's chalk 2 losses up right off the bat for the Iowa Hawkeyes. And then maybe they split some games against some of their West Division, their old, at that time would be old West Division rivals. And now you're a 5-4 team in conference. So that's a team that could fall a little bit. I said it at the beginning of this segment. Just because you're falling doesn't necessarily mean this is a bad thing. Like, they could go 5-4 in conference, and this could be an 8-4 overall team at the University of Iowa, which was still very respectable in this conference. They could even lose to Ohio State. They could lose to USC and still do fairly well in their home schedule. It's a tough slate. It's a little bit of a turnover year for the Iowa Hawkeyes, so it should be interesting to see if they can reload, if they can rebound, what happens on offense at the quarterback position, and who knows what happens with the Ferences as well. All right, let's go to the University of Michigan. What? Michigan a faller? When I talk about falling, I talk about Michigan just barely falling out of the Big Ten championship game, right? This is a team that has had a Big Ten championship after Big Ten championship. They are the class of the conference right now. They are the conference. They are the class of the conference here right now at the University of Michigan. This is still an elite team. This is still a fantastic football team, but man, there is going to be a lot of turnover. J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, Cornelius Johnson, Roman Wilson, guys on the offensive line, even though they seem to reload on that offensive line as well at Michigan. You take a look at some players on the defensive side of the ball, and this might be as good as they're recruiting in 2024, as good as Michigan, and they are recruiting really well, those are going to be young pups in 2024, and I think it might take some time, some development. If J.J. McCarthy goes on to the NFL, where does Michigan go at quarterback? We're going to talk about Jaden Davis as the show goes along. Is Jaden Davis a guy that can step in and be that guy from right when he steps on campus in 2024? I think that's a question that needs to be answered at the University of Michigan. There's going to be a lot of turnovers, and when you take a look at their schedule, they got to play Ohio State on the road. They got to play USC on the road. When you talk about falling, I'm talking about falling out of the Big Ten championship game, because this could still be a 10-2 team, could still be a college football playoff team, and who knows, maybe they could make a run towards a national championship. But a lot of turnover, tough games on the road. Ohio State and USC could maybe rise up as well in 2024. That's 2024. That's 2024. Let's move on here a little bit to 2025. Let's go to 2025, why don't we? Looking ahead. That's what we're doing here on this segment of the program. All right, let's look ahead to 2025. I want to first take a peek at Wisconsin, because Wisconsin in 2025, that will be the third year of Luke Fickell. And if we know anything about college football, it's that third year of a new head coaching reign when things can really take a jump up. And that could be the thing that happens here with Luke Fickell. Third year is usually the breakout year for a rebuild. When you take a look at 2024 for Wisconsin, you look at a guy like a Braylon Allen He's likely going to be gone after 23. They're going to have to retool their stuff in the running game. Luke Fickell is recruiting very well this year for this 2024 class. It could be one of the better classes in Wisconsin football history, a top 20 type of class for Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. It could end up becoming. So by the time we get to 2025, the schedule eases up a little bit for the Badgers, and let me get into that. And then, of course, those recruiting classes, those Fickell guys, will have a chance to kind of get a year under their legs, so to speak. Home games for Wisconsin: Illinois, Iowa, Michigan State, Ohio State, and USC. Now, I know the Buckeyes and the Trojans, those are going to be two tough home games. Going to be two difficult home games. But when you take a look at Wisconsin on the road that year, at Minnesota, Rutgers and Northwestern, winnable games, away from Madison, and at UCLA. This is a schedule where maybe you could see a Wisconsin team be a 9-3 type of team. Where is Wisconsin going to be in 2023? Where is Wisconsin going to be in 2024? Personally, I'm of the thought that Wisconsin probably contends for the West Division title, somewhere between 8-4 and maybe 10-2 in 2023, possibly. And then maybe 2024, they take a little bit of a step down, but 2025, they could take a little bit of a step possibly back up. But here's another thing. They play Alabama on the road out of conference. It's not going to be easy for the Badgers, but I believe they get their toughest games at home. And here's other thing to keep an eye on in 2025. Luke Fickell is building that defense back up, right? This defense is Jim Leonard, Nick Herbig, Keanu Benton. They're losing some pieces for 2023. Maybe by the time we get to 2025, that defense at Wisconsin will be built back up into a big-time defense. And then you've got that matchup against UCLA in the Rose Bowl where Dante Moore, we'll get to him in just a minute, Dante Moore will be a true junior, possibly an explosive UCLA offense. That could be a big-time battle. Offense versus defense. That could be a lot of fun. Wisconsin at UCLA. Speak of the devil, let's talk about the Bruins. Let's talk about UCLA. Dante Moore would be a true junior, one of the very best quarterbacks, one of the very best players, overall players in the 2023 recruiting class out of the Detroit, Michigan area. A lot of excitement building with Dante Moore and UCLA. This could be his Heisman campaign. I think that factors around what does Chip Kelly and UCLA surround himself with. The Bruins have to recruit better. Right now, I think in 2024, there's something like 9th out of 16 in the Big Ten. They need to recruit better at the skill position to really get the most out of the talents that Dante Moore really possesses. We know Chip Kelly can build together. We know he can build a great transfer class. But can he continue to recruit at the Big Ten level to make this a competitive team? UCLA, home games, Maryland, Purdue, Rutgers, all very winnable games. And then Wisconsin, they get at the Rose Bowl. Away games at Illinois, at Michigan State, at Nebraska. Got to go on the road to Penn State, on the road to USC. I think UCLA is going to come into the conference. They're going to be floating maybe around 7-8 wins. This 2025 team, I think, will be probably one of the better teams in the early era for UCLA in the Big Ten Conference because of where Dante Moore will be at that point in time. And we got a non-conference game against Georgia. That's going to be key. But we could see Dante Moore and Dylan Raiola in a big-time quarterback battle at the Rose Bowl. Potential riser, but you kind of look around at that schedule. You got to play Georgia. You got to play Penn State and USC on the road. It's not going to be easy, but maybe UCLA can knock off their crosstown rival and maybe even it out and maybe get up to an 8-win season, get up to a 9-win season. Who knows? Maybe they can get to a 10-win season as well, because Penn State might be coming off a year where they don't have Drew Allard, they don't have Nick Singleton, they don't have Katron Allen. There's a lot of ebbs and flows, of course, in college football. Going to wrap things up with the lone faller that I have in 2025, right? Nebraska is going to be coming off a year, probably a pretty good year in 2024 with Jeff Sims as quarterback. And this is really where you're going to start to see where Matt Rule really stands as a head football coach, how he's done in recruiting, right? Because it's usually been year 3 where he broke out at Baylor and he broke out at Temple. That's where things usually break out for Nebraska? Where do they go at quarterback? Is it Daniel Kalen, the kid that they 3-star kid that they just recently got to flip from Missouri to Nebraska after Dylan Raiola didn't work out for the Huskers? Nebraska in 2025 has home games against Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, Rutgers, and UCLA. Michigan, UCLA, they're going to go on the road to Ohio State and USC. Minnesota and Maryland are road games as well, 2025. It all depends on what the quarterback situation is. A lot of people around Huskertown, they like the talent that Daniel Kalen has at quarterback, but can he translate that into good quarterback play for Nebraska? That's the beauty of this schedule, folks. You're going to have risers and you're going to have fallers. Okay, there's going to be a lot of ebbs and flows. I think you're going to have teams that they're going to pop into that top 4 and compete with some of those top 4 teams. Most of the time, teams outside of that top 4 only have to play 2 of those blue bloods every year. Nebraska kind of draws the short end of the stick in 2025 when they play Michigan, Ohio State, and the University of Southern California Trojans. So that's the beauty of why I love this 9-game schedule. It's because of, I think we're going to see a lot of unique things happening, a lot of ebbs and flows, teams rising up, teams falling down. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. A lot of fun to watch. Let's get to some comments. Here. We got Hawkeye fans in the house. Jonathan Weaver is here today. Erica Goldberg is here tonight as well. Lewis Papp representing the Maize and Blue of Michigan. Erica talking about Iowa. Of course, the Hawks will reload. Marco, believe, is the answer. Mobile and a solid quarterback. He seems to be the guy in line after the Cade McNamara era ends at the University of Iowa. Where is the development going to be at that point in time? Marco, I believe at that point would be a sophomore. I believe a young quarterback in this Iowa system. Would they feel the need to maybe go out and get another transfer? We're going to see what the development of Marco is going to be. Lewis Papp, what if Michigan, Ohio State play 3 weeks in a row? They meet in the game. Then for the Big Ten Championship, first round of the playoffs, I am going to tell you why that will not happen. That will not happen. Really, for any rivalry. It could be USC, UCLA, because it would take an act of God for the Big Ten champion not to be one of the 4 teams that receive a first round bye. Remember, the top 4 conference champions receive a first round bye into the college football playoff. Now, that doesn't mean that, say, Michigan wins and they get a bye and Ohio State wins their first round game. That doesn't mean we could see Ohio State and Michigan in the quarterfinals. That could possibly happening. But I just don't see them meeting 3 weeks in a row. Not 3 weeks in a row. Could be 3 games in a row for one of the teams, but not 3 weeks in a row for that very reason. It would take a lot for the Big Ten champion not to get that bye of the first 4 conference champions. Jeremy Nork checking in. Thanks, Jeremy, for being a part of the show. Trying to get your comment to pop up there. There it is. Who will be added to the Big Ten next? Pac-12 teams or ACC teams? Folks, here's the deal. We're cool. We are so cool on expansion here in the Big Ten. We have put it into the freezer. We've put it into the refrigerator. That's where we are as a conference right now with expansion. We've gotten to a point where it's just not prevalent anymore. I think we're going to remain at 16. I think the big thing in expansion, the expansion talk right now, is the Big 12. It's the Pac-12. What's going to happen with these teams? What's going to happen with these conferences? I think the Big Ten, with their release of the 2024 and 2025 schedule, it's going to be at least 2 years. What happens after that? I mean, maybe the Pac-12 signs a short-term deal. To me, I said this months ago, and I some things kind of changed my mind a little bit at times, but I'm coming back. What's old is new again, at least in my thoughts for expansion, is like, I don't think we're going to expand it till 2030, till the new TV deal. I firmly believe that. I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it needs to happen. I think the Big Ten wants to figure out what the travel situation is going to be. And I honestly think this. USC and UCLA are on the West Coast. They're in a rich recruiting area that they want all to themselves. They're a lot like Texas A&M was in their days in the SEC, right? We're in the best conference and we're in Texas. Okay, they're in California, they're in Southern California, and they're in the Big Ten playing brands like Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and Wisconsin and Iowa and teams like that. They want that all to themselves right now. Now, if they get to a point where a few years down the road, their athletic budgets, man, we can't travel so much. We got to have more teams here on the West Coast. Now, if that happens, then there might be a little bit of a different story that might be told. But right now, I think the Trojans and Bruins want it all themselves. We've seen what happens when Oregon gets good. Oregon can go into SoCal and take a lot of those recruits that might end up at USC. I think the last thing that USC in particular wants is Oregon in the Big Ten Conference. You add Oregon, that could give them a little bit of a boost. I'm not sure the Trojans want that right now. I don't think the Trojans want that right now. Thanks, everybody, for being here on the show tonight. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Sunshine Design, check it in. Northwestern, watch out for the Cats. I think Northwestern's going to be a better team this season. Proven quarterback that can put up numbers, that can put up wins. And Ben Bryant, transfer from Cincinnati. How about Richie Haggerty, pass rusher? I think, didn't PFF or somebody ranking one of the top 10 pass rushers in the conference this season? A.J. Henning coming in. They're going to be better. Just how much better? We're going to learn a lot on the first Sunday. Yes, Sunday when Rutgers plays Northwestern on CBS. I think that's going to really find out a lot about both teams. Okay, if either one of those teams wants to make a big jump forward and potentially be a bowl-eligible team, a win in that opening game for Northwestern or for Rutgers, respectively, might be what they need to do. Lewis saying Northwestern 4-8 at best. This was a 1-11 team last year, so getting 4-8, it would be an improvement, but still, I think it could provide some very interesting conversations at Northwestern as it pertains to the future of Pat Fitzgerald, as it pertains to the future of Patty Fitz over there at Northwestern. Gary chiming in. Do you think USC and UCLA will have any growing pains in the Big Ten? This is a very interesting worded question because growing pains, they are, whether some people want to admit it or whether they don't. I believe USC and UCLA are going to have to adjust their style of play a little bit. Look at the Bruins and look at the Trojans from a year ago. Look at DTR, look at Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams won the freaking Heisman. I understand that. But these were teams that could sling it, and these were teams that didn't really have great defenses. Like, look at USC. I believe their defense cost them a chance to maybe win a national championship for Lincoln Riley. Maybe get to that type of level at USC. Their defense was terrible. They couldn't tackle anything. UCLA was a team that could look at the matchup between USC and UCLA. One of the more entertaining games of the season. But man, they were just going up and down and up and down and up and down the field. If you want to go up and down against Michigan, I just don't know. Against Michigan, against Penn State, against some of these teams, I just don't know if that's going to happen on a regular basis. I think you got to check yourself a little bit. So growing pains. I don't know if USC is going to have growing pains. If you look what Lincoln Riley is doing and the level he is recruiting at and the guys that he's able to bring in, transfers and mix everybody together, USC is going to be in contention, I think, for the Big Ten championship. This year is going to tell a lot whether their defense is going to be better. Can this defense compete at a Big Ten level? Look at what Michigan has had on the defensive side of the ball the last few seasons. Can USC get to that level? Nobody's doubting what USC can do on offense. Okay, the level they're recruiting at on offense. And it should be no surprise to anybody. Lincoln Riley is probably the best offensive recruiter as a head coach in college football. He is. It's the defense that USC really needs to hone in on. It's the defense, I think that people really need to start talking about and maybe worrying about. And when you talk about growing pains for USC, it could be on defense. When I look at UCLA, I think that's a team that they're such a wild card. They're such a dark horse in all of this stuff, right? I just don't know. I just don't know what I'm going to get out of UCLA. This is a team that could win 8 games. This is a team that could win 9 games fairly consistently, being in LA, recruiting, all the good stuff that comes with being a member of the Big Ten Conference. And Chip Kelly, a guy that's been there and done that at Oregon before. Winning in the Pac-10 and the Big Ten, a little bit different though. But UCLA, I think, is a little bit of a wild card. They could be a 6-win team. They could be a 7-win team. They could be an 8-win team. They could be a 9-win team. I believe UCLA is kind of all over the place. And they could be all over the place. They could really dip and dive a little bit in terms of their win-loss record from year to year. So that's what I gotta. That's what I gotta say about that. Good question. Good question. Badger and Bournemouth fan checking in. He doesn't want any more further expansion. Look, our league, the Big Ten, as we sit right now, it's a Power 2 league. I'm going to talk about the Big Ten schedule against the SEC schedule in segment 2 of the show tonight. And the Big Ten is right there. The Big Ten is right there, folks, with USC and UCLA with ads. Yeah, the travel's going to be weird. Yeah, the travel is going to be what it's going to be. But in the grand scheme of things, these are 2 great ads, and it's really going to add a lot to the Big Ten Conference. Let's calm down for a little bit. Let's calm down for a little bit with USC and UCLA, with West Coast expansion. I've said this before as it pertains to expansion on the West Coast. Right now, USC was a good team in the Pac-12. You got Utah. Who knows where Colorado's going to go? I want to see Oregon and Washington dominate the league. Let's see them increase their value. Maybe they win a playoff game. Maybe they win a couple of playoff games. Maybe good things happen for Oregon and Washington, and they really do well in the Pac-12, and they become top 15 programs in the country. Let's see them in a weaker-minded Pac-12. Let's see them build themselves up a little bit. Like, if the Pac-12 stays together, they add like San Diego State and SMU. Like, this is a program, or this is that's a conference in the Pac-12. Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Utah, solid teams. Now, obviously, it's not close to the Big Ten. It's not close to the SEC, but it's a solid league like the Big 12, like the ACC as well. If USC couldn't beat Utah, they're not beating Michigan or Ohio State or Penn State. I think USC, I got a stink bug in here flying around, so this is going to be interesting for the rest of the show. Flying right in my face. That's what a live stream is all about. It's very, very warm here in Minnesota, so you get all kinds of critters that come out and sneak into the basement, so to speak. So that'll be interesting to battle with for the remainder of the program. But really, it's USC, like, playing in the Pac-12, very different than playing in the Big Ten. Very different than playing in the Big Ten Conference. How are they going to adjust to this league? A more physical league? A league with much better defenses? There's going to be some big-time adjustments, and they got to get ready for that here in 2023. HD90 Dog checking in. Thanks for being here tonight. If there are teams that struggle to meet financial expenses for travel with this first round of West Coast expansion, the Big Ten as a conference has failed, in my opinion, spells disaster going forward. We're going to find out. Like, you're going to, at the end of this deal, you're going to be making $90 million. You're going to be making $100 million. I think that's up to USC and UCLA to really figure out the travel expenses, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be traveling. I don't believe football is going to be the thing that's really going to hurt these teams. I think they're going to have to get very creative with basketball scheduling, with volleyball scheduling, where you're playing 2 or 3 games during a week. I think that's where things really come into play. I think that's where things, I think for basketball, teams from outside LA, you're going to take Penn State. They're going to play at USC and at UCLA during a Friday or a Saturday or a Tuesday and Thursday. When you look at other parts of the Big Ten Conference, when you look at other sports kind of as well, you have USC. They're probably going to travel to some bigger airports. You're going to fly into Chicago, then you're going to play Northwestern, you're going to play Illinois, you're going to play Iowa, you're going to go on a road trip of sorts as well. They're going to play teams in chunks, 3-4 teams at a time. They could play Penn State, they could play Rutgers, they could play Maryland in a chunk out there as it pertains to travel. So I believe that they're going to figure it out, USC and UCLA, and not travel as much, but we'll see how that goes. Jonathan Weaver chiming in. Who will Penn State play the last game of the regular season without a permanent rival? This is something that I've had on my mind as well. So in this first 2024 and 2025, they still have Michigan State on the schedule. So I believe that land-grant trophy game, PSU and MSU, that's still going to be the final game of the regular season. But if Michigan State, right, as it's been for the last handful of years, but going forward with the Nittany Lions and going forward with the Spartans, I believe that they're going to have to get creative with that last game of the year, because there might be some teams, say they have UCLA as maybe one of their permanent rivals. Maybe you move because USC and UCLA is not always the very last game of the season. So maybe there's some flexibility on some of these rivalry games. Penn State, I think, is the one with the interesting schedule. With no permanent protected rivals, I think they've got a lot of potential to form a rival. Hasn't really panned out with the land-grant trophy and Michigan State in that game. It's a solid series. I wouldn't call it a rivalry of sort. Like there's other trophy games, like Minnesota and Penn State is a trophy game. Are they rivals? I wouldn't call the Nittany Lions and the Gophers rivals per se. So there's a lot of potential to really open things up for Penn State. It's just geographically, you're by Rutgers, you're by Maryland, and they've dominated those series. Maryland kind of going back to their Eastern Independent days, and then Rutgers ever since they joined the Big Ten. It's just there's not a good geographical rival for Penn State in the Big Ten right now. Appreciate that, Roger. Thanks for tuning in. Roger Blum tuning in here tonight. Lewis Papia. Pitt. That's a non-conference game right now for Penn State. It's just, I don't know. Pitt has gotten better the last few seasons, but still, it's definitely a historical rival within Penn State circles. They haven't played as much over the last 10, 20 years or so. Gerald McKinley chiming in. We're talking about travel expenses for USC and for UCLA. If there's travel, I think it may speed up the add Western expansion. Yep, USC and UCLA are going to have to decide at some point, yeah, we want to be the only teams on the West Coast in this Power 2 conference in the Big Ten, but man, we need some teams on our time zone, man. We need some time zone. We need an Oregon. We need a Washington. Who knows? Who knows in 5 years Colorado could be a top 10 team, and Prime could develop Colorado into this AAU, Denver market, Mountain Time Zone, great football program. Who knows where Colorado's going to be? Like for me right now, I would like to see, like I've always been weird with this, with Colorado and maybe Arizona State. I want to see the Big Ten join together. I want to see them in contiguous states, like when Rutgers and Maryland were connected to Pennsylvania. That'd be nice to see. I don't think it's going to happen. I think we're going to have like a West Coast pod or region, so to speak, with maybe, Oregon, Washington, Stanford, Cal. They've all been kind of mentioned in there as well. But I think Colorado and Arizona State, that's not happening. I just want to say that. But it'd be nice for all the states to be connected. That's all. Doug Phelps coming in on the show tonight, maybe thinking Iowa-Penn State. Iowa-Penn State is a potential rival. It wouldn't be the last game of the season because you got Iowa against Nebraska, but they could fit that in later in the season. Badger and Bournemouth fan, USC and UCLA won it in the Big Ten, so they're just going to have to deal with it. Absolutely. Travel and costs. That's on them, not the conference. Absolutely, and that's what I said. It's on them to figure it out, right? Some of these, Cal is in deep debt. UCLA was reported to be in a lot of debt as an athletic conference. So they've got to figure that out to make it all work. I think they're going to be fine. I think they're going to be in a much better situation now than they were in the Pac-12. They're going to be much better. Even though they have to travel further, like I said, they're going to make it work. Instead of having a flight every week, like for some of these other sports where you're traveling more often, you're going to travel into Chicago and you're going to play Northwestern, you're going to play Wisconsin, you're going to play Illinois, you're going to play Iowa, and you knock out a road trip and then you're at home for 2 weeks. I don't know if it's going to be as big of a deal. Like you've got major airport hubs. You look at Minneapolis, St. Paul, you look at Chicago, like that in the eastern part, you could fly in, to maybe a place like a New York and play Rutgers, then Maryland, then Penn State. They're going to figure it out in terms of travel in kind of these clusters of away games. But they'll figure it out. Football, I think, is the least of their concerns. Playing one game, you fly back, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. But I think in football, when you're flying every other week, that could maybe add up a little bit as well. Now remember, HD90 Dog brings up an interesting point. We still got to finalize a lot of this TV deal that our buddy Kevin Warren kind of left behind for Tony Petitti. TV deal, the finalization of that television deal. I think there's a lot of things on the plate for Tony Petitti. There's a lot of things on the plate for the Big Ten Conference right now, and I think those things have to be considered. Those things have to be talked about. Okay, before we talk about expansion, I kind of said this at the beginning of Tony Petitti. Let's let him get into his role a little bit. And there's a new president out at Oregon who was the provost at Wisconsin. Let's let these people kind of digest their food, so to speak. Let's let them, get into the roles a little bit before it's like we make a drastic move just a couple of months on the job. And I think Tony Petitti wants to be comfortable. He wants to really make sure that this is the right thing to do because there's some uncertainty of what might be out there on the East Coast in the ACC. I think what's happened in the ACC is more valuable than maybe Oregon, Washington, Stanford, or Cal. Miami, if Notre Dame were to ever become available, those are more valuable. Those are more valuable than I think what's out there out west. Lewis Papp, happy anniversary. Penn State, 13th year. 13th? This will be the Penn State 13th anniversary in the Big Ten. It seems 30. I thought 30th. Oh, boy. Wow, I can't read. 30th anniversary in the Big Ten. Yeah, they joined in what, 92? Well, it was, and then football was like the year after, I think, in like 93. I think 93 was their first football year. So, yeah, 30 years. 30 years in the Big Ten. That's insane. That's insane. They've been around in the Big Ten about as long as I've been alive. I was born about a year or two before Penn State coming to the conference. So Penn State in the Big Ten is, and me, we're a little bit joined at the hip. Kind of where our Big Ten journeys were around the same time. USC and UCLA. I mean, what are they making in the Pac-12 right now? 30? What is it, 30, mid-30s maybe? I don't know, with this current Pac-12 media deal. The first couple of seasons, I think, will be a small jump. But once we get in the middle of the deal, you're looking at $60 million, $70 million, $80 million. And then, you're going to be making a lot more money in this new Big Ten deal than you did the Pac-12. You're going to be traveling more, but I think they're going to be fine, like I said. Miami and Notre Dame, that's a heck of an ad. That's a heck of an ad. The more time that goes by, I think Miami is bound for the Big Ten. I think they provide a lot. Here's what I want to see from an Oregon, from a Miami, from teams that might not be doing great, but they do bring a lot. I want to see them build up their football program. So when they join the Big Ten, they are really good teams that can compete. folks, as decades go by, the Big Ten and the schedule is not going to get any easier. They're going to continue to add bigger football brands. Miami is one of those. Oregon's one of those. Maybe Notre Dame is one of those as well. Like, if I'm the Big Ten Conference right now, I'm looking at Oregon. I'm looking at Washington. I'm looking at a lot of these types of programs. That's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a lot of these programs that can really boost the football revenue of the Big Ten. Maybe in this next media deal, we could get 150, maybe 200 million per school at some point. That would be crazy. That would be insanity. That'd be just flat out insane. Miami and Penn State. Did those teams meet? Remember, they were a part of the Eastern Independence back through the 80s and the early 90s, 70s, maybe even going back to, you had what? Florida State, Notre Dame, Miami, Penn State, West Virginia, those types of teams that met that were independents out there on the East Coast. I want to thank everybody for being along for the ride here tonight on Big Ten Ted Live, segment 1 in the books. And we're going to head on here pretty soon to segment 2. Going to head on to segment 2. In segment 2, we're going to be talking about the SEC schedule. We're going to be talking about the Big Ten schedule, which schedule means more, right? In the SEC, it just means more non-conference games. So we're going to be talking about that in segment 2. So going to briefly talk about a couple of short segments. Northwestern's building a new stadium. I want to thank Sunshine Design for that video, or for that topic here today. Is that going to make a difference in Chicagoland? Going to talk some recruiting as well. More from Jonathan Weaver as it pertains to expansion. I'll believe this round of Big Ten expansion is over when the Pac-12 has a deal and or the Big Ten puts dates to the 24 and 25 schedule. I hear what you're saying. You want to see the nail in the coffin, so to speak. Like, man, it's just like, if Colorado and Arizona end up going to the Big 12, what happens with the rest of that conference? Well, you still got Oregon, you still got Washington, you still got Utah. It can still be a conference, but still, you're down to 8 teams, and maybe something else has to be done. I don't know what's going to happen if Colorado and Arizona vote for the Big 12. Then what happens? Who knows if that's going to happen? We're going to see if that happens here in the coming weeks, maybe the coming months. So, want to get into segment 2 of the show here tonight when we're talking about schedules. Talking about the 9-game Big Ten schedule. It was released earlier this evening. 8-game SEC schedule. 8-game SEC schedule. What that's going to look like with the additions of Texas and with the Oklahoma Sooners. So let's get into that, why don't we? Let's get into that. We got the Big Ten schedule at 9. We got the SEC schedule at 8. Big Ten schedules and SEC schedules 2024. It's really the start of a new era in college football. Really, it's the start of a new beginning, new teams, new blue bloods, both in the Big Ten and the SEC. Now, everybody was clamoring for a 9-game conference schedule. Man, a 9-game conference schedule in a 16-team conference is buttery smooth. It just works. But here's the thing with the SEC. They're a lot like Notre Dame. They can do whatever the heck they want, and there's little to no consequences. Right? For years and years, Notre Dame, you're independent. Why don't you just go and join a conference? Why don't you just do this? It's so easy. Because they didn't have to. Just like the SEC doesn't have to play 9 conference games. We know why it benefits the SEC to play 8 conference games. More teams that are bowl eligible. More teams that have the ability to get to the college football playoff. And you're still recognized by ESPN as God's gift to college football, as the greatest thing walking around today on the college football earth. But here in Big Ten country, we know something a little bit more. We like to think that maybe we are a little bit more educated on some fronts in terms of this matter. But they don't have to do anything that anybody tells them to do, because they are the kings of the castle. They are the ones that have won the national championship games. so they can do whatever they want to do. Now, here's the thing about the SEC schedule. Everybody's going to play Texas or Oklahoma in 2024, and the SEC only unveiled the 2024 schedule. Okay, when we saw the Big Ten scheduling announcement, we saw what the model's going to look like. Here's the teams you're going to play. Here, they kind of explained everything. Here's the home games. Here's the away games. Here's how we got to it. You know, they talk about showing your work, right? In math class when you were growing up, the Big Ten showed their work. The SEC just said, yeah, here's the 2024 schedule. Let's get hyped about Georgia and Bama. Let's get hyped about Texas and whoever they're playing. Let's get hyped about Oklahoma and whoever they're playing. But what we didn't talk about is how we got to that point. In an 8-game schedule, things can get a little bit messy. I want to pull this quote from a CBS Sports article from the SEC. While no school will travel to the same location it traveled to in 2023, talking about the SEC schedule, it should be noted that when a long-term schedule format is determined, it may not be possible to structure a schedule that does not include some schools playing at the same location in back-to-back years in the first year of a new format. So not only are things a little bit messed up where 8 games, it doesn't fit nice and buttery smooth like that 3-6-6 model that the Big Ten has, but Mississippi State could be playing at Alabama 2 consecutive years, kind of drawing the short end of the stick. You know, the more I kind of look at what the SEC has with this schedule, with this 8-game conference schedule, the more I really dive into it, I think they're going to cater this schedule to make it fit what they want, to get a team into a national championship game, to get a team, get more teams into the college football playoff, to get more teams bowl eligible. Now, if they were to do things nice and easy, nice and fair, everything's the way it is. Like, let's take a look at a team like Alabama, for instance. Alabama has historical rivals. Third Saturday in October against Tennessee, Iron Bowl against Auburn, and of course LSU. 3 protected rivals. You take out yourself, that's 12 more teams. In a 8-game conference schedule, you already got 3 on the books. You're going to play 5 one year. You're going to play 5 the next. That's 2 teams left over. So the Big Ten schedule is like you play every team every 2 years at the bare minimum. The SEC, you could not play a team for 3 years. And the way they kind of schedule this, they're talking about percentages, winning percentages, losing percentages. There's a chance you might not play a team for 3 years. There's a chance you might not play a team for 4 years. And I think they're going to make things like right now, Georgia and Bama are playing in 2024, but how many more times is that going to be played over the course of time? Whereas Ohio State and USC are playing every other year. I think the SEC is going to do what fits them and what benefits them to get in, not necessarily explain to us what the model is or what it's going to look like from year to year. I think they're just going to do what really benefits them on their level from an 8-game conference schedule. Now, the SEC, like I want to say, the schedule is strong. There's no doubt. 2024 has got great games all across the schedule, and the SEC still is going to have it's going to have one of the best, maybe the best conference schedule, which can be argued, but it might have some of the best games on the calendar in 2024. But here's what I hope happens when we get to the 12-team college football playoff. Okay, you got the Big Ten playing 9 games, a lot of 9 conference games, tough teams, whatever. And then a lot of teams are playing a Power 5 non-conference opponent. That's 10 Power 5 games. And the SEC is playing 1 less Power 5 game. It's a scheduling requirement for the SEC to play their 8 league games and then play a Power 5 team. I want to see the selection committee take that into consideration. When you're considering a 9-3 Wisconsin against a 9-3 Ole Miss, take into consideration that Wisconsin had to play the 1 extra conference game. In that scenario, they would have 1 extra conference win against conferences that are in the same ballpark, the Big Ten and the SEC, at the top of our beloved sport of college football. I really hope the College Football Playoff Committee really takes that into consideration. Now, that's when you talk about which schedule means more, I think you got to look at it from a college football playoff standpoint. Because yes, there are going to be games. There are going to be tougher games, and those games are going to happen more often on the Big Ten schedule. I think those games within the Big Ten will mean more. There are more marquee games happening more often. There are definitely lots of marquee games happening in the SEC, right? But I just don't know, as we continue to go along, where are some of these teams going to be? Where's a Texas going to be? Where's an Oklahoma? Where's a Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss? Where are they going to be? That's where I want to see things go. That's what I really want to see develop. When I talk about a schedule meaning more, and when you talk about a schedule meaning more, it depends on how good your teams are. Like, in order for the Big Ten schedule, I think, to mean more, I think Wisconsin's got to rise up. Nebraska's got to rise up. Iowa has to remain good. Minnesota, you kind of keep on going down the line. These teams need to continue to get better. USC and UCLA need to still be really good football teams, and Big Ten teams probably need to knock off some SEC teams. I mentioned UCLA and Georgia have a crossover. Wisconsin and Alabama, that's going to be very difficult for Big Ten teams in those two particular crossover games. But I believe the Big Ten schedule, as we continue to go on, I think it's going to be a tougher schedule to get through a conference in the Big Ten than it is the SEC. That's what I believe. To get through the schedule, right? You don't have that break late in November for the SEC, where a lot of these teams are playing FCS teams. 9 games, Big Ten, most of the time, consecutive games all the way through is going to be probably the toughest stretch in all of college football. I firmly believe that. If that means a schedule means more, then so be it. Then it means more. But I think when you talk about it meaning more, the College Football Playoff Committee are the ones that have to determine which schedule means more. I believe the Big Ten schedule at times will be more difficult, adding in an extra game, playing the elite teams in the conference more often. The Big Ten did their schedule rollout way better than the SEC. I think there's still a lot of questions with the SEC kind of going forward as their schedule is concerned. That's kind of how I feel about the SEC. That's how I feel about their scheduling model as compared to the Big Ten Conference. So the Big Ten and the SEC both have really big marquee games, but the Big Ten is just a lot more clear in what's happening right now than the SEC. Let's go into some comments. Let's see. I'll come back to that one. Gerald McKinley wasn't part of the issue with the 8-game schedule that ESPN wouldn't pay more for that extra conference game. Yeah, that appears to be. I did hear that as well, and it usually comes down to money with all of this, even though you can see the SEC protecting themselves, getting more teams possibly into the playoff, getting more teams into bowl games as well. Why would ESPN pay more for an extra conference game? They already show the home non-conference SEC games, which are almost all of them. So in theory, a non-conference game, right? Would you rather see Alabama and Furman or Alabama and Tennessee's a bad example. Alabama and Florida? You know what I mean? It's the value of the particular game. You're paying more for better games. I think is one thing that maybe ESPN would possibly pay up for. HD90 Dog. I don't disagree with you. However, until the Big Ten can make the jump, beat the SEC, win the Natties, right? I talked about the Natties. Even with one less conference game, the SECs will still be more respected. I think that's the thing. I talked about the success on the field. Like, that's a lot of times where in the college football playoff committee, which schedule means more, a lot of times that means who wins, who's the better team. I just don't want to see 2 9-3 teams and all of a sudden they're in the SEC, they're better. I don't want that. And that's not fair. Okay, that's, I think, where things like, Big Ten played one more conference game. You got maybe a SEC team that played Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and teams like that, whereas this 9-3 Big Ten team played Ohio State. They played Penn State. They played Wisconsin, teams like that. I just think when we have inconsistency in scheduling, we're going to have these debates where these debates could easily be solved if we're both playing the same conference format. That's, I think, something that needs to be talked about as well. It's going to be hard sometimes to settle these debates because things aren't as consistent as they need to be. Badger and Bournemouth fan thinks we're going back to the 70s when Michigan and Ohio State always won the Big Ten. Remember the Big Two and the Little Eight. USC, UCLA always won the Pac. Okay, because Oregon really wasn't a team over in the Pac that really did really well, really until Mike Bellotti came in, and then it was Chip Kelly after that. USC or UCLA always won the Pac. Nebraska, Oklahoma always won the Big Eight as well. So are we going to get to a point where Bama and Georgia are in the SEC, where it's going to be Michigan and Ohio State in the Big Ten? You're going to have your tier ones. You're going to have your elite sections, I believe, of conferences. Like, there's no doubt in my mind in all of this. You're going to have some elite teams. No question. No question. It's just that's going to be the big question to answer in the SEC and in the Big Ten. How can you remain and how can you – I'm going to talk about that later in the week in a video about Minnesota. PJ Fleck is the three-star king. Can a developmental program still be a Big Ten championship contender? Can a Minnesota? Can an Iowa? Can a Nebraska? Matt Rule has said he wants to be a developmental program. Can those programs compete for a Big Ten title despite some of these things that are happening? I think those are questions that need to be asked as well. So that's, it's. I just wish we had consistency between the Big Ten. I wish we had consistency with the SEC as well. But here we are. Here we are. Good stuff, everybody, tonight. Good discussion. Had some expansion talk. You can't go a show in the off season without talking about expansion. Right? Yeah, it seems that way. It seems like it's a topic that's ever going on. It's a topic that seems to continue and continue and continue as we keep on going down the line here in the college football off season. So a couple more things to talk about here today. Actually, I'm going to go back to a comment now that I skipped over before that I do want to get to. This is from Gerald, talking with Jonathan here. I don't disagree. I think expansion's on pause. I do think 2026 would be when any new teams start here, though. I think there was a reason they announced 2 years, and he's talking about the scheduling as well. And remember, I know this is a big-time long shot, but the Big Ten, the Notre Dame NBC TV contract ends. That contract ends after 2025, so maybe that could be a time when the ACC really starts figuring things out. Maybe that's a time when Notre Dame says, maybe now's the time to make the move. And somehow they work together. They're the deciding vote to break up the ACC, and in order to do that, everybody's got to know where they're going. Notre Dame and Miami might go to the Big Ten. Florida State and Clemson might go to the SEC. That's 4. Where's everybody else going? I think that all has to be decided. Okay, I got a couple of quick topics I want to talk about here today. And remember, if you want to talk about something else, leave those in the chat. Leave those in the comments if you want to go in a different direction here tonight. First thing I want to talk about, this was a video idea or a topic idea from Sunshine Design. Does Northwestern's new stadium move the needle in Chicagoland? You know, this is a very interesting question. This is a very interesting topic. Ryan Field is slated to undergo a renovation, build a new stadium, all that. I just want to say this right off the top. Ryan Field is one of probably the worst stadium in the Big Ten, right? It is in rough shape over there in Evanston, Illinois. But I will say this about Northwestern. The Ryan Fieldhouse was built a handful of years ago, 5 or 6 years ago. That's that practice facility that's overlooking Lake Michigan. It's a very nice practice facility. They're obviously looking to invest into facilities and really upgrading a lot of these facilities at Northwestern. But Sunshine Design's question was, can this move the needle? Can a new stadium, generate enough interest to move the needle in Chicagoland? You know, Chicagoland is a lot like LA. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of professional sports. There's not nearly as much as Los Angeles, but there's still, obviously considering Los Angeles is Hollywood and everything, there's a lot more competition in LA than there is in Chicago. But I think Northwestern, considering that their history isn't like something like a USC, they still have a lot to compete with, I believe, when it comes to the Northwestern Wildcats. They need to continue the facelift on their facilities. But you can build the nicest stadium in the world, and Ryan Field and the area surrounding it might be a great stadium. It might be beautiful. But you're not going to move the needle in your market unless you put a winning team on the field. Like, that's what's going to draw the attention of Chicagoland people. Like, whether it's every other year, like they've been winning. They went in 2018 and 2019. They both went to the Big Ten championship game as West Division champions. But I think there needs to be more consistency of victories at Northwestern to really move the needle and to really have them be really have a lot of attention in the Chicago area. Like, you can have all the best facilities, but if your team goes 3-9 or 2-10 or whatever, every single year you're not going to have the attention and you're not going to be able to take full advantage of those facilities. Now, remember, Ryan Field is kind of moving down in attendance, or the capacity, I should say, a little bit, and thus attendance. I think that's a good thing, right? It's very rare that you see Ryan Field filled up in Evanston, Illinois, but I believe it's going to take a lot to really transform and move the needle in the Chicago area, because there's a lot going on in the Chicago area as well, especially the Chicago Bears slated to build a new stadium out there as well. That could generate some excitement. So when we're talking about stadiums, probably not great timing that the Bears might be building some things out in the suburbs as well. Evanston, a little bit removed from the city of Chicago, so to speak, as well. So that's, I think, something. So you really got to capture if people are going to come out and drive to the suburbs to kind of take in a Northwestern game. So I think there's a lot of that goes into it. This is a team that needs to win on the field to really have things going. And look at in-state. In-state is another thing to keep in mind. Look where Illinois is going. Illinois and Northwestern in the land of Lincoln in the state of Illinois have really swapped places. Right, Northwestern, a couple of division championships, good seasons. Illinois was bad during that time. And now they flip-flop. Illinois looks like a solid team. 8-win season. They look like another good team this season. And then you take a look at the Northwestern Wildcats, and now they're at the bottom of the barrel where Illinois was for a long period of time. So these two teams can't meet in the middle. They kind of got to flip-flop places. And now Brett Bielema, the first thing he said when he came to be the coach of the Illini, I want to recruit the state of Illinois. And we're going to get into that in our last segment of the show. I want to recruit the state of Illinois. And he's doing it pretty well. Pretty well. He's got some work to do, but with having Brett Bielema in that state and Illinois and an improving Illini program in that state, that makes things a little bit harder. I know they're not in the Chicagoland area, but it makes it harder in terms of competing against your in-state rival. So for Northwestern, got to get wins on the field. A winning product is a product that people are going to want to come out to see. Okay, that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at with Northwestern. That's where I'm at. Let's go to some comments. Brian showing up here on the show tonight. Notre Dame and Wisconsin back at Lambeau in 2026. They're back at Lambeau Field again? I did not know that. I did not know that about a future schedule for Wisconsin. I know Wisconsin's got a home and home against Alabama. That should be interesting. Alabama, I think, has a home and home at some point against Minnesota as well. So they're going to get their taste of that. Yeah, you look at that. They're back at Lambeau Field in 2026. Back at Lambeau Field, 2026. Wisconsin that year plays Western Illinois and Pitt as well. So they're going to play 2 Power 5 teams, the Badgers will, in 2026. Interesting. Yeah, Wisconsin has the home and home with Alabama in 2024 and 2025. That's going to be good because they played in Chicago. That's right. I was thinking of the Wisconsin LSU game that they played at Lambeau Field. It was Soldier Field in Chicago that they played a couple of years ago. Notre Dame and Wisconsin. Badger and Bournemouth fan, Wisconsin 24 schedule is brutal. Michigan and USC on the road. Penn State and Alabama. That's tough. That's a tough one for the Wisconsin Badgers. That's going to be a very, very tough go for Wisconsin. Because you're coming off a year, you're not going to have Braylon Allen. It's going to be, the second year of Luke Fickell. Where is his recruiting class is going to be? You might need to go to the transfer portal again. I think quarterback, they're fine for the next handful of years with Braden Locke and Nick Evers at quarterback for the Badgers. But yeah, that's going to be a brutal, brutal year. We're going to find out where Luke Fickell is as a head coach in this conference very quickly, folks. Very quickly. We're going to find it out very quickly. I can't wait for it. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right, here we go. Gerald coming in. NIL on the way. I'm not sure facilities will win very many recruiting battles. Could lose them if it's terrible. You still need good facilities, okay? NIL, the bag, as they say, is not the number one priority for every single kid. It's going to be the number one priority for some kids, just not every single kid. I think you need to have good facilities. Like when I look at a place like Wisconsin, they need to upgrade the McLean Center. That's in desperate need, I think, for an upgrade for a practice facility. At Wisconsin, it's a smaller facility. It's not a full-size facility down there in Madison. They need an upgrade as well at Wisconsin. So facilities play a part. I see what you're saying here, Gerald, with NIL, but, and there's always a but I just think you still need facilities are still the name of the game. You see schools across the country that are really going out and building big time facilities with all this TV money. Tony, Northwestern. Tony, thanks for being here. Tony, Northwestern academics, great, yet problematic in recruiting in some cases. This is one of those schools. It's like a Stanford, right? It's just when you kind of look and you kind of keep on going, you look at what Jim Harbaugh and David Shaw did at Stanford, and it really, you're like, wow, how'd that happen? Northwestern is kind of one of those deals where academically it's kind of hard to get kids through sometimes. It's hard to get kids through with the academic standards at Northwestern, and they're always going to take a lot of pride in that as one of the best academic institutions in the country. So athletically, they might suffer because of that. Sunshine Design, appreciate the video idea, appreciate that. If anybody wants to talk about a specific topic on a live stream or in a video, tweet, DMs, leave comments on YouTube, all kinds of stuff. All kinds of way to get my attention to bring things up on a live show or a recorded segment during the week. Don't count out Evanston, says Sunshine Design. Don't count them out. We won't. HD90 Dog, Iowa Northwestern at Wrigley Field. Me personally, not a fan of football games on a baseball field. Not a fan of that whatsoever. I think it creates a lot of logistical issues. It's just whenever you ever had a football game at a baseball stadium and says, you know what, this game, I'm so glad this game was played at a baseball stadium and not a football stadium. I don't know if that's ever happened, right? What was that Minnesota Bowl game at Yankee Stadium, right, last year in the Pinstripe Bowl where the field was crap? It's just like, it's never good. It's never good. Never good. New facility, yep. Chris McIntosh has talked about that at Wisconsin as well. $90 million a year will build a lot of facilities in Wisconsin in much need of a new practice facility. They recently completed a nice new addition to one of the ends of Camp Randall Stadium, the end by the field house. Over there have many fond memories of the field house over there. They used to play the Wisconsin High School State, at the very least, girls basketball tournament out there as well. Yeah, they used to have a lot of good events out there. Basketball, like I said, basketball used to play there all the way back in the day. Remember when Michael Finley was a Wisconsin Badger back in the day? So thanks, everybody, for being along for the ride here tonight on Big Ten Ted Live. Let's get to our final segment. Our final segment of the show, and remember, you guys can kind of go off in a different direction if you choose. Leave those in the chats and the comments so I can kind of fit those in here as we move along. So here's a quick mention that I want to talk about. Imarian Stewart, depending on what recruiting service you subscribe to and what recruiting service you go to, he's either a high 3-star or a low 4-star wide receiver out of the state of Illinois. He's set to commit on Friday. He's got 2 Big Ten teams that are his finalists, Wisconsin and Michigan, along with Oregon and along with Tennessee. So set to commit on Friday. And it's looking like he's going to go to Michigan, right? Whether you call it crystal ball, recruiting prediction machine, whatever it is, it looks like he's headed to the University of Michigan. And this will continue to bolster this recruiting class at Michigan. It's going to do great bolstering this class at the University of Michigan. When I look at a guy like an Imarian Stewart, you look at a speedy, very fast track and field type of guy, kind of reminds me a little bit of maybe an A.J. Henning, a guy that you can send in motion, involve in different ways in an offensive set. A.J. Henning, of course, as well from the state of Illinois, so they've got that in common as well. He's a top 10 player in Illinois, 4-star according to On3, 3-star according to 24/7 Sports. So if he commits to Michigan, he'll probably be the top receiver commit in this class, and I think the one that Michigan fans will be most excited about. Okay, but what I really want to go into with all of this is the Michigan recruiting class in 2024, because you've talked about 2023 and the turnover that they could have: J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, Cornelius Johnson, Roman Wilson. I could go on and on and on about the turnover that happens from 2023 to 2024. And Jim Harbaugh is saying, yep, I know what's maybe going to happen in 2023, a talent that I've had on campus here for a handful of years. I know I need to hit home runs in 2024, and right now Michigan is hitting those home runs in 2024. They are the number 2 recruiting class in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. They have 3 top 100 players right now. Of course, you look at Jaden Davis, 4-star, number 4 quarterback in the country, number 35 player in the nation. He is the jewel. He's the crown jewel of this recruiting class right now for Michigan. Brady Preakstorn as well. Preakstorn, 4-star, number 5 tight end in the country, top 100 guy. Once again, Jordan Marshall. He just recently got bumped up to the top 50 in the Rivals 250, right? They think he's doing pretty good. Number 7 running back in the country, number 87 in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. Jaden Davis and Jordan Marshall, those are the guys right now at Michigan. Those are the guys at Michigan that could really be the next generation of great players for the Wolverines. Michigan has 12 four-star players, second in the country according to 24/7 to Notre Dame, who has 13. You got 2 four-star tight ends. They're building a team with good quarterback play, players in the backfield, tight ends, linemen. They're building the way and recruiting the Michigan way. That's what they're doing. And Michigan is just proving they continue to rise up and rise up and rise up recruiting-wise. Now, they don't necessarily maybe have that 5-star, that all-everything type of guy. Jaden Davis, I believe, is a guy that I watch him play and I watch his film and I'm like, I know what Michigan does. And I think he can fit into this offense and be really good. He can fit into this offense and maybe be a Big Ten championship type of quarterback like a J.J. McCarthy, like a Cade McNamara. Like, he's kind of splitting the difference between J.J., who was a 5-star guy, and Cade, who was a 3-star guy. Meet him right in the middle. You got a high 4-star type of guy in Jaden Davis that can come in and really make a difference. So if Marion Stewart commits to Michigan, he's going to be the wide receiver guy in that group that could really make a difference in a few years at the University of Michigan. But I love what the Wolverines are continuing to build on the field right now at the University of Michigan. And recruiting is going extraordinarily well here for the Wolverines. Everybody in Ann Arbor got to be pretty happy because they know the turnover that's going to happen from 2023 to 2024. Got to keep up that pace. Got to keep up that pace. Let's go to some comments. Yeah, remember this game? Wisconsin and Stanford basketball at Miller Park, now American Family Field. It was impossible to see the game. Bad sight lines, shooting. Yeah, I mean, Final Fours have been played in stadiums, and aesthetically they look great on TV. Not sure how they are in the building or for players and all that. Pinstripe Bowl, that's been tough. I know they play a game in Boston at Fenway Park, the Fenway Bowl as well. It's not needed. It's not needed. I understand with Yankee Stadium, right? The Notre Dame, Army, and Navy, they used to play games at Yankee Stadium back in the day. I understand the history as it's connected to college football, but it's just, in today's day and age, we're not running the wing T anymore, right? You need better turf. USC is building a brand new soccer stadium and lacrosse stadium. They're getting Big Ten ready across all sports. Yeah, I did see that as well. Looks like it's going to be a very nice facility on campus over there at USC. Remember, of course, football is where a lot of people focus their attention, but a lot of time it's these facilities in other sports, these soccer-specific facilities, lacrosse in this case, or other facilities of that matter. Gerald chiming in, curious to see if USC or UCLA taking hockey to the varsity level from club level. It's why I'm also curious if Arizona State gives them an outside shot at the Big Ten. I talked about Arizona State before. Outside a shot at the Big Ten, I think. Look, Phoenix is one of the fastest growing spots in the country. They have a Division I hockey team that could fit in to the Big Ten as well. I think they need to be better on the field in some spots. But every time someone says that, every time I say, well, they're in a good market, but they're in a good, and all that stuff. Well, look at Rutgers. Look at Maryland. Maryland, Rutgers maybe a little bit on a lower scale than Maryland. But look at Rutgers. Look at where they were in Arizona State. Of course, they've got that in New York City is a huge market. But people say that, like when they bring up Stanford, the Bay Area, big market, Arizona State, everybody moving to Phoenix. So I know that gets brought up a lot of time. Outside chance, I think athletically they would need to take a big-time step forward. All right, more into it as well. Talking some hockey, some Big Ten hockey. Who did Wisconsin hire? Was that the old Minnesota State coach? Was that Mike Hastings? I don't know why Mike Hastings sticks into my mind. Tony chiming in, Gopher hockey is better than Wisconsin. Gopher hockey is better than a lot of people. Almost everybody in the country, and they've got some of their best players coming back this next season as well. Gerald McKinley, go blue. Michigan fan in the house. Michigan fan in the house tonight. A lot of good things. A lot of good things coming out of the University of Michigan. Yeah, Arizona State. I think they need to be a little bit better athletically. I think the Big Ten right now is sitting in such a position of power that they're going to be extremely picky at who they take forward in expansion next. I think Miami is right there. I think Notre Dame is right there. If they want Florida State, according to Brett McMurphy, they're going to be a little bit more flexible on the whole AAU stuff. So that might be something to really consider as we continue to mull over expansion and expansion candidates down the line. That might be something to keep an eye on as well. Very good discussion here. We are in the heat in many different ways. We are in the heat of the Big Ten offseason. I'm hoping to have previews. We're going to start looking ahead to next season here on the channel in the next few weeks. Okay, we're going to start looking ahead. Previews are going to be sometime, maybe mid-July, maybe early August, that kind of time on the channel as well. Want to thank everybody for coming out here for Big Ten Ted Live tonight. That'll do it for another edition of Big Ten Ted Live every Wednesday, 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central. So, for me, for the stink bug that was flying around and causing some disruptions for all of us here at Big Ten Ted, I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.